Hey everyone, what's up? My name's Anjay. Hope you're doing awesome today. Come for the finance. Stay for the gold. Let's dive into one of the wildest information you're ever going to hear about America's gold stash. So, the United States claims it's sitting on over 8,000 tons of gold, right? But what if I told you nobody's actually laid eyes on that shiny stuff in decades? Picture this. Massive vaults under crazy tight security, with the most famous one being the Fort Knox Bullion Depository in Kentucky, supposedly holding about 4,580 tons. That's nearly half the country's total stash. The rest? Split between the U.S. Mint and the Federal Reserve Bank's vault in New York. Altogether, we're talking around 8,100 tons, a number that's barely budged in years, just tiny tweaks here and there. Now, here's the kicker. The official value of all this gold, what they call the book value, is locked in at the super specific price of $42.22 per ounce, totaling about 11 billion bucks. But hold up, that's peanuts compared to today's market price. At current rates, this gold's worth hundreds of billions. Yeah, the U.S. gold reserve is a gold mine, pun intended, even though its official accounting hasn't been updated since the 1970s. Why not, though? Shouldn't they be checking this stuff every year? Supposedly they do, but it doesn't really happen like that. And get this, lately U.S. banks have been flying thousands of gold bars from London to New York, sparking all kinds of wild theories about what's really going on. So, if we rolled up to Fort Knox today, what would we find? Why won't the government just audit it and spill the beans? And if it's gone, what's that mean for regular folks like us? Buckle up, because this is about to get juicy. Gold's basically baked into America's legendary lore, and for ages, people have whispered that the U.S. might not have all the gold it says it does. But first, let's rewind. How did we even get over 8,000 tons of this stuff? Back in 1933, during the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt pulled the plug on the gold standard and dropped Executive Order 6102, basically confiscating most privately owned gold. Americans had a hand over their gold coins and bullion to the government, getting paper dollars in return. Super controversial move at the time, but it flooded the U.S. Treasury with gold. To store it all, they built the Fort Knox Depository in 1936, and by 1937, trains loaded with the seized and borrowed gold were rolling into these shiny new vaults. Then, as tensions ramped up before World War II, the U.S. started raking in even more gold from other countries looking for a safe spot to stash it. By 1941, Fort Knox alone was holding over 20,000 metric tons. Peak levels. At that point, the U.S. had about 23% of the world's official gold, the biggest pile of wealth ever concentrated in one place in human history. How that happened? Decades of trade surpluses in Europe sending their gold over during World War II for safekeeping. Gold was a huge deal back then, tied straight to the money system. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement pegged the U.S. dollar to gold at $35 an ounce, and other countries tied their currencies to the dollar. America's giant gold hoard gave everyone confidence in the dollar's value. But then, in the 50s and 60s, things flipped. Post-war, the U.S. started running trade deficits, spending big on foreign commitments, sending cash left and right. Soon, countries were like, hey, give us our gold back for these dollars, which was totally allowed under Bretton Woods. Gold started flowing out of U.S. vaults to pay other nations, and our holdings dropped from that World War II high. By 1971, they settled around where they are today. So what did the U.S. do? Kinda cheated. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon slammed the gold window shut, killing the dollar's convertibility to gold. That move trashed Bretton Woods and shoved the world onto a pure fiat money system. Paper cash. No backing. Instead of letting people cash out, the U.S. decided to hang on to what gold it had left. Which begs the question, if the dollar is not tied to gold anymore, why is the Federal Reserve still sitting on so much of it? Well, here's the twist. It's not really theirs. Since 1934, the Fed hasn't directly owned the nation's gold. It all got handed over to the Treasury. What the Fed's got is a claim on it, in the form of gold certificates issued by the Treasury. Those certificates sit on the Fed's balance sheet, valuing the gold at that old school $1.42 an ounce rate. totaling about 11 billion bucks. Meanwhile, the physical gold chills in treasury vaults. Even though the dollar is not gold-backed anymore, that stash still props up the dollar's perceived value in a weird, indirect way. So why keep all this gold? It's seen as a hedge against currency risks. Senator Rand Paul once said it still gives the dollar value, which is why we don't ditch it. It's like a relic of stability from the old monetary days. But here's where it gets spicy. If they mark the gold to market value, jumping from $42 an ounce to today's price, the Treasury could theoretically issue more gold certificates to the Fed, raking in more dollars. People have argued we should revalue the reserves to add hundreds of billions to the Treasury's books, which could cut the national debt or steady the economy. So why don't we? That's where the fun theories kick in. The government swears the gold's still there, super safe, but tons of folks don't buy it. For starters, it's all so secretive. You can't just waltz into Fort Knox and check it out. That alone fuels speculation that something's off. Back in the 60s and 70s, some claim most of Fort Knox's gold got secretly shipped out. Rumors even swirled that President Lyndon B. Johnson sent tons to London in the late 60s. The theory goes that the U.S. gold reserve might have been used or lent out without anyone knowing, leaving Fort Knox as a giant, guarded, empty shell. Those ideas grabbed the public's imagination, especially since the reserves were shrinking back then. Others say, nah, the gold's there, but it's not ours. Historically, Fort Knox stored gold for other countries, like during World War II and the Cold War, when European nations parked their stash here to dodge Nazis and Soviets. Maybe the U.S. is gold, just not American gold. Officially, though, most foreign-owned gold got shipped back ages ago, and what's left in Fort Knox is supposedly all U.S.-owned. Something has been secretly swapped or loaned out, but officials deny that, saying none of the Treasury's gold is tied up in loans or swaps. Then there's a wild idea that some bars might be fake, gold-plated tungsten or something. Tungsten's density is close to gold's, so you can make a bar that passes a weight test but isn't pure. That theory blew up after an unverified 2009 report claimed China found fake bars. Never proven, but it got people wondering if Fort Knox might have some phonies too. Congressman Ron Paul even asked publicly if the bars were real or just tungsten bricks in disguise. During the 2008 financial crisis, folks speculated the U.S. quietly sold or leased gold to suppress prices or raise cash. Crazy, right? So if some believe this stuff, and it's supposedly not true, why doesn't the government just audit it and tell us what's up? It's complicated. They claim audits happen, but no full, modern ones ever been publicly released. Here's what we know. When President Dwight Eisenhower took office in 1953, rumors were flying that some Fort Knox gold paid wartime bills. So, auditors did a limited check, the last full audit of U.S. gold, over 70 years ago. It wasn't super thorough by today's standards, just a spot check of about 5 to 7% of the bars. They didn't count or test everyone, but sampled enough to say it looked good. People in the 50s were like, cool, we're set. Fast forward to the 70s, with the economy tanking, high inflation, oil crises, and ditching the gold standard. Questions popped up again. Where's the gold? A Washington lawyer published a book in 1974 claiming $20 billion in Fort Knox gold was missing, and it blew up. To shut down the skeptics, the Treasury staged a show. On September 23, 1974, they opened Fort Knox to 100 congressmen and the media. First outsider peek in ages. They showed off stacks of bars. Even let some folks hold a few for pics. A radio reporter was like, all I can say is, I saw gold there. People call an audit, but it wasn't no deep dive, just a few hours, one vault room, no testing or weighing, pure PR. Then, from 1975 to 1981, the Treasury and General Accounting Office ran more systematic audits, checking parts of the gold stash annually, counting bars, testing random samples for purity. By 1981, they said no discrepancies popped up. Still not a 100% audit, though they verified about 80% of the gold, checking serial numbers on just 21% of the bars. After that, audits tapered off. Since the 80s, the U.S. Mint and Treasury say they inventory and audit regularly, but it's all, trust me bro, no public details. That is, until 2017, when Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin visited Fort Knox with Senator Mitch McConnell and a few others. First sitting Treasury Secretary, there since 1948. Afterward, Mnuchin said, "Glad the gold's there. Cool, but still not an audit, just a VIP tour." Now, people are buzzing again, partly because of trade wars and reports of banks flying 8,000 gold bars, about 2% of the total, from London to the U.S. Some think it proves we're out of gold. Nah, it's more mundane, banking strategy called arbitrage. Big players like JP Morgan and HSBC are shipping bars across the Atlantic because gold's pricier in New York, about $20 an ounce more than London. Doesn't sound like much, but with billions in gold, it adds up fast. These banks are market makers, moving gold worldwide, leasing it out to earn interest. They hedge that risk by selling gold futures in New York, betting prices stay stable. But geopolitical chaos, like Trump's tariffs, jacked up New York prices more than London's, so their bets started bleeding cash. To stop the hemorrhaging, they're flying gold over, settling futures contracts, and closing short positions without huge losses. JP Morgan alone's moving over $4 billion worth this month. Not a Fort Knox conspiracy, just banks chasing profits. Still, even that doesn't fully quiet the doubters. Even Elon Musk's like, audit Fort Knox, live stream the vaults. Who wouldn't watch that? So why not do it? Security? Hiding something? Economists like Barry Eichengreen say there's no incentive for the Fed or Treasury to lie. It'd be a massive scandal for little gain. Me? I'm not so sure. There's plenty of reason to fudge the truth. Officials say everything's fine, audits are solid. But then you've got Elon tweeting it's gone, and people don't know what to believe. No wonder skepticism's through the roof. We're supposed to trust this unseen treasure, never fully audited in public, is untouched. The government could squash 99% of the doubt with a bar-by-bar audit. Independent observers, the works. They haven't. Maybe it's cost, security, or they think it's pointless. Whatever the reason, we don't know the gold's there. That's the problem. If it turned out the gold's gone, holy cow, global panic time. The dollar's credibility would tank. Inflation could spike, and countries might demand gold-backed cash again. It'd be one of history's biggest financial meltdowns. That's why I say we need answers. It's there or it isn't. Time to find out. Right now, there's no hard proof it's missing. Signs point to it being safe and sound. Maybe Elon livestream it someday, and we'll see. But would we even know what we're looking at? I wouldn't. Back to square one, no full audit. Huh? I didn't get to lick the bars. But you know what'd settle it? Guess we'll see what happens. I'd love to hear your theories. What do you think's going on? Hope your day rocks. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'd love to see you back here next week. Catch you later. Peace out.